She didn't come from money or privilege, she came from the people. And when Jasmine Crockett took that microphone, she reminded every one of us what it means to have a voice that truly fights for us. The hearing room was packed tighter than usual. It wasn't one of those routine, half-empty sessions where speeches fade into background chatter. No. This one felt different from the moment Jasmine Crockett walked in. The air itself felt heavy, as if everyone could sense that something important was about to happen. Cameras were already trained on the long wooden table where the representatives sat. Papers were stacked, microphones adjusted, and aides whispered quick reminders to their bosses. Every sound, the click of pens, the soft shuffle of documents, felt louder than it should. It was the kind of silence that builds not from peace but from anticipation. Jasmine Crockett sat near the center, her posture steady, her eyes focused. She had that calm look, not of someone who wanted to start a fight, but of someone who knew exactly what needed to be said. When she finally leaned toward her microphone, all the side conversations in the room came to a stop. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. The kind of voice that makes people pause mid-sentence because they feel something genuine in it. Today, she began, I want to talk about what life really looks like for the people we say we represent. There was no script in front of her, just a few notes and handwritten, personal. She didn't need much. She wasn't speaking for headlines or applause. She was speaking for people who didn't have microphones of their own. She went on, describing what millions of Americans were facing. She spoke about the rising cost of living, the way grocery prices climb faster than anyone's paycheck can catch up. She painted a picture of seniors standing in store aisles counting bills, wondering what they can leave behind this week just to afford their prescriptions. For our older citizens, Jasmine said, the cost of groceries, rent, and utilities keeps climbing, far faster than Social Security or Medicare benefits. Many seniors on fixed incomes are forced to choose between basic needs and vital medications. Her words hung in the air, sharp and unfiltered. There was no drama in her tone, no exaggeration, and just truth, told plainly enough to sting. She talked about healthcare next, about how insurance premiums keep rising while coverage keeps shrinking. She spoke about seniors who spend more time fighting billing errors than getting care. She described patients who skip checkups because their copays have doubled, and those who stretch medication across weeks just to make it last. Healthcare premiums are rising. Deductibles are increasing, and supplemental benefits are being cut, she said softly. People are being left behind. People who spent their lives building this country, now forced to skip care altogether. You could see a few members shift in their seats, uncomfortable, but not because they disagreed, because it was hard to hear. Hard to face the reality that while debates fill hours of airtime, the most vulnerable Americans keep falling through cracks that no one seems in a hurry to fix. Then came the topic that made the entire room quiet again: housing. Housing is another crisis, Jasmine continued. Higher property taxes, rent spikes, and energy costs push our senior residents toward homelessness or unsafe, precarious living situations. Her tone wasn't angry. It was steady, deliberate. She wasn't talking about statistics. She was talking about people. Real people. She spoke of the woman in her district who lived out of her car after her rent tripled in 1 year, of the elderly couple who now shared a one-bedroom apartment because they couldn't afford the home they'd lived in for decades. As she spoke, some nodded. Others stared blankly, unsure where to look. But everyone was listening. And the healthcare system, Jasmine said, her voice softening, fails to meet the needs of older adults, especially women, people of color, and those living in rural communities. We urgently need accessible, age-friendly care that preserves dignity, independence, and quality of life. It wasn't just the words that carried power. It was the way she said them. Every sentence sounded like something she had witnessed firsthand. There was no arrogance, no grandstanding. Just a woman who cared deeply about the people whose stories rarely reach these polished halls. By now, even the staffers who were typing on their laptops had stopped. The entire hearing room seemed suspended in her words. Jasmine leaned back slightly, glancing around the chamber. For a moment, it felt like she had managed to cut through all the noise, the politics, the partisanship, the power plays, and remind everyone why they were supposed to be there in the first place. Her message was simple. People were hurting, and leaders had forgotten how to listen. That silence after she finished speaking wasn't the awkward kind, it was respect. For a few seconds you could almost feel the weight of what she had said pressing on the room. Then, just as she took a breath to continue, another voice broke through the quiet, cold, confident, sharp enough to cut the air in half. Bondi had leaned into her microphone, and with one calculated remark she shattered the calm that Jasmine had built so carefully. What she said next would change the entire mood of the hearing, and turn one powerful speech into an unforgettable confrontation. Pam Bondi's voice sliced through the air like a blade. It wasn't loud, but it carried a chill, the kind that instantly changes the energy in the room. She leaned toward her microphone with a faint smirk, tapping her pen against the table as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. "Congresswoman Crockett," she began slowly, "it's touching to hear your concern for Americans. But maybe you should remember who really belongs in this country before you start lecturing others about it." The words hit the air like a shockwave. For a second, no one moved. Jasmine froze mid-breath, her expression unreadable. Across the room, a few members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One aide looked down, pretending to sort papers that didn't need sorting. The silence that followed was heavier than the insult itself. Bondi, sensing that silence, mistook it for victory. She pressed on. "Some people," she continued, "talk about America like they've lived its struggles, but let's be honest, some just got here, and it's hard to take lectures about our seniors from people who don't even share our American values." That was it. The line that made everyone stop breathing for half a heartbeat. You could feel it. The quiet outrage, the disbelief, the discomfort spreading like a slow fire through the room. Even those who usually agreed with Bondi on policy looked uneasy now. It was no longer about politics or disagreements. It was about something deeper, something uglier. Pam Bondi had crossed into dangerous territory. She wasn't just interrupting Jasmine Crockett's speech. She was trying to strip away her belonging, to reduce a respected lawmaker to a stereotype. And she knew exactly what she was doing. She leaned back in her chair, satisfied. Her tone turned mocking, as if she was testing how far she could go. "Maybe," Bondi said, "before preaching about fairness and compassion, some of us should take a look at what we actually contribute to this country." The room fell utterly silent again. Even the camera crews hesitated, unsure whether to keep recording. Jasmine sat still. She didn't rush to answer. She didn't fire back with anger. She simply stared at Bondi, her hands folded, her face calm, but her eyes were sharp, unblinking. That stillness was more powerful than any outburst could have been. Pam Bondi shifted slightly, almost impatiently. "No response?" she said, feigning innocence. "Or maybe you don't have one." Jasmine took a slow breath. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and measured, the kind of voice that demands attention without needing to raise it. "Pam," she said, "you can question my ideas all day long. That's fair, but what you just said tied to questioning who belongs here, that's not debate. That's disrespect." Her tone didn't waver. Each word came out clean, deliberate, and heavy. The room, once buzzing with tension, fell silent again. But this time the silence was on Jasmine's side. Pam laughed quietly, a dry, forced sound. "Oh, come on," she said, "don't play the victim here. I'm just saying people should respect the system before they criticize it." Jasmine didn't look away. "Respect," she repeated. "Let's talk about that word for a second." Her voice sharpened just enough to make Bondi's smirk falter. "Respect isn't something you get by putting others down," Jasmine continued. "It's something you show, especially to the people you claim to serve. And if you're talking about belonging, let me remind you, every person who pays taxes, who raises a family, who contributes to their community, belongs here. Including me." The chamber seemed to exhale. Even those who had stayed quiet began nodding subtly, but Jasmine wasn't done. She looked directly at Bondi and added, "You're talking about belonging, Pam. But let's talk about honesty. Because the people we represent deserve that more than anything else." Bondi blinked, uncertain where Jasmine was going. She had expected a defensive speech, not a pivot. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her tone calm but cutting. "You've stood in front of this country and made a lot of promises. You've spoken about justice, about truth, about accountability. You once told the nation there was a client list, and remember that? So where is it now? The air changed instantly. Bondi's smirk disappeared. The mention of the Jeffrey Epstein files, the case she had been connected to, hit like a thunderclap. Everyone in the room knew exactly what Jasmine meant. The client list that Pam Bondi had once hinted existed, the one that was supposed to reveal hidden names and powerful connections, had never been released. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Pam Bondi shifted again, her face tight. "This isn't the time or the place to discuss that," she said quickly. Jasmine didn't look away. "I think this is exactly the place," she said calmly. "Because the people who trusted you with that truth, they deserve answers. Don't you agree?" Bondi's jaw tightened. Her confidence was slipping, and everyone could see it. Across the room, the energy had flipped completely. Jasmine had taken Bondi's attempt to humiliate her and turned it into a spotlight, one that was now fixed squarely on Pam. And in that tense silence, something became clear to everyone watching. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just defending herself. She was defending the idea of truth itself, even if it meant calling out someone powerful in front of the entire country. What happened next would prove just how far Pam Bondi was willing to go to escape that question, and how one calm voice could bring a whole room to a standstill. For a moment, no one dared to breathe. Pam Bondi sat frozen, her usual polished expression cracking at the edges. The question hung in the air like a heavy weight. "You told the whole country there was a client list, and so where is it now?" It wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm, measured, but carried more force than any outburst ever could. Jasmine Crockett had said it so plainly that it hit harder than an accusation. It sounded less like a jab and more like a demand for honesty, the kind that leaves no room to hide. Pam's eyes darted around the room looking for support. But no one moved. Even her usual allies stared down at their notes, pretending to review papers. The room was tense, electric. It was the kind of silence that tells you everyone is waiting to see what happens next. Pam tried to recover. She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Congresswoman Crockett," she said, forcing a light tone. "You're twisting my words. That's not what I said, and you know it." Jasmine didn't blink. "Then please," she replied, "tell us what you did say." Pam's mouth opened, but no words came out. She fumbled through her papers as if an answer might be hiding between the pages. Jasmine leaned back, her expression calm, but unrelenting. "You see," she said, "it's one thing to talk about respect and integrity, but it's another to practice it when it matters most. The people who trusted you with that investigation deserved answers, not excuses." Her voice was still steady, but the quiet intensity behind it made every sentence land like a hammer. Pam tried again. "That's not fair," she said quickly. "Those records, those files, aren't for public discussion. You know how sensitive that is." Jasmine nodded slightly. "Sensitive," she repeated. "Yes, but it's interesting how sensitivity only comes up when accountability is involved." A murmur moved across the room. Not loud, just a ripple of recognition. People were beginning to realize what was happening. Pam Bondi, who had entered the hearing with full control of her stage, was now cornered, not by aggression, but by precision. Jasmine had done something rare in politics. She had turned a personal attack into a moment of truth. Pam reached for her glass of water, her hand trembling just slightly. She took a sip and forced another smile. "Congresswoman, I'm not here to relitigate old stories. Let's stay on topic." Jasmine tilted her head. "Old stories?" she asked. "The search for truth isn't an old story. It's a responsibility, especially for those who claimed they'd deliver it." Her words were simple, but the tone was cutting. You could feel the weight of every syllable. Pam opened her mouth again, but Jasmine continued before she could interrupt. "You came into this room questioning who belongs here, questioning me. But maybe we should question why certain promises made to the American people were never kept." The tension was unbearable now. Even the sound of a pen dropping would have echoed. Pam tried to laugh it off, but it came out nervous, shaky. You really think you can just stand there and lecture me about integrity? She asked. Jasmine's reply was instant. I don't need to lecture you, Pam. Your record does that all by itself. That line cut deep. You could almost feel the air leave the room. Pam's smile vanished completely. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't smirk or show anger. She simply continued speaking, as if she were giving a closing statement in a trial. The people I represent, the seniors struggling with rent, the families who can't afford health care. They expect accountability from everyone who serves them. That includes you. That includes me. None of us should be above answering questions. Her words were clear, deliberate. They echoed off the chamber walls, reaching even the corners of the room where staffers were still frozen in disbelief. Pam looked like she wanted to speak again, but this time, nothing came out. The woman, who had interrupted Jasmine so confidently just moments ago, suddenly had no words left. Jasmine continued, her voice now almost soft, but powerful in its calmness. You said people like me don't belong here, she said. But maybe the real question is, do we still make room in this building for the truth? A few heads turned, eyes wide. No one expected her to say that out loud. But Jasmine wasn't here to play safe. Pam's face flushed slightly, a mix of anger and embarrassment. This is ridiculous, she muttered. Ridiculous, Jasmine repeated quietly. What's ridiculous is asking Americans to trust leaders who hide behind excuses. Pam's chair creaked as she shifted uncomfortably. For someone used to being in control, the loss of command was visible in every movement. Jasmine leaned slightly closer to the microphone. Pam, the truth doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient. You can try to bury it, ignore it, or walk away from it, but it always finds a way back. Pam didn't respond. Her eyes dropped to the table. That was when it became clear to everyone in that room. The power had shifted completely. Jasmine? Crockett had turned an attempt to humiliate her into a masterclass in composure and integrity. Without shouting, without insults, she had dismantled an attack and replaced it with accountability. The silence that followed wasn't awkward anymore. It was awe. Even those who came in skeptical of Jasmine's message couldn't deny what they had just witnessed in it, a moment of pure control, where truth stood taller than power. Pam Bondi's confidence was fading fast. The cracks were showing, and though she didn't know it yet, the confrontation was about to reach its breaking point, a point she wouldn't be able to recover from. Because once Jasmine Crockett asked that question, there was no going back. The truth was out there now, and everyone in that room knew it. Pam Bondi's face was still, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted toward the cameras, toward the other lawmakers, toward anything that could anchor her back in control. But it was too late. The silence in that chamber wasn't working for her anymore. It wasn't the respectful kind of silence that comes from power. It was the uneasy quiet that comes when someone's mask begins to slip. Jasmine Crockett didn't rush to fill it. She just waited. Sometimes silence can speak louder than words, and right now, it was shouting everything. Pam tried to shift in her seat, pretending to look through her notes again, but the papers only trembled slightly in her hands, giving away what her words couldn't hide. She was nervous. "Congresswoman," Pam said finally, forcing a tight smile, "I think you're making this personal. I came here to talk about policies, not baseless accusations." "Policies?" Jasmine echoed, her tone calm but sharp. "Good. Let's talk about that." She looked straight at Bondi. "Because policies are what got us here. Policies that protect privilege but ignore pain. Policies that let the powerful escape questions while the rest of America struggles just to make ends meet." Pam opened her mouth to speak, but Jasmine continued before she could interrupt again. Her voice carried a quiet strength now, each word more deliberate than the last. "You know what I find personal, Pam? Watching people's lives fall apart while those who could help look the other way. That's personal. Watching our seniors lose homes because their rent went up again. That's personal. Watching them cut pills in half because they can't afford medicine. That's personal." Her voice didn't tremble. It rose, but not in anger and in conviction. Every sentence pulled the room deeper into her rhythm. The lawmakers, the aides, even the cameras seemed to lean closer. And yet, she said, her tone steadying, when someone brings up these real struggles, you interrupt. Not to offer help, not to discuss solutions, but to question who belongs here. The words hit like a slow drumbeat. Bondi's eyes narrowed. I don't appreciate you twisting my words, Pam said coldly. You're taking a simple comment and turning it into something it's not. Jasmine gave a small nod, as if she had expected that. Then let's clarify, she said softly. What exactly did you mean, Pam? Pam hesitated. Just a second too long. That second was everything. It was the difference between confidence and collapse. Jasmine didn't move, didn't press further. She just waited again. The silence wrapped around the room, and this time it was heavy with expectation. Pam finally spoke, her tone uneven. I meant that people should respect the laws of this country, she said quickly. That's all. Jasmine's gaze didn't waver. Then say that, she replied. Don't hide it behind who you think belongs and who doesn't, because the minute you start dividing people like that, you stop representing them. It was surgical, calm, clean, and devastating. Pam's lips parted, but no words came out. She could feel the attention slipping away, not to her argument, but to Jasmine's strength. Even those who had dismissed Jasmine earlier were now seeing something they hadn't before. Composure under fire, clarity in the chaos. Pam leaned back, crossing her arms. This is ridiculous, she muttered under her breath. But the microphones picked it up. Everyone heard it? Jasmine smiled faintly, not out of mockery, but understanding. It might feel ridiculous, she said quietly, to be held accountable in public. But that's what this room is for. Pam's jaw tightened. You think you're clever, she snapped. You think one viral moment makes you right? Jasmine's expression turned serious again. No, Pam, she said firmly. What makes me right is that I'm speaking for people who don't get to sit in rooms like this. People who don't have your kind of protection. People who can't walk away from hard questions. Her voice was now deep, calm, and unshakable. And yet you're about to do just that, aren't you? Pam blinked, startled. Excuse me? Jasmine leaned forward slightly. You can't answer the question I asked. You can't face the truth behind your own statements. So you'll walk out because that's easier than accountability. For a second, it seemed like time froze again. Pam's face tightened. Her hand twitched toward her papers, gathering them up. You're out of line, Pam said sharply, her voice rising. This entire hearing has become a circus. But everyone knew what was happening. The circus wasn't the hearing. It was Pam Bondi's unraveling. Without waiting for permission, she began stacking her notes into a neat pile. She avoided Jasmine's gaze, muttering something under her breath. Jasmine didn't say another word. She didn't need to. Pam stood abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She turned toward the door, heels clicking in quick, hard steps. A few aides exchanged glances, whispering quietly. But no one stopped her. And just like that, she was gone. The room stayed silent for a long moment after the door closed. It wasn't the stunned silence of earlier. It was something else, respect. Jasmine exhaled slowly. Then she spoke, her tone calm again. For the record, she said softly, I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for an answer. But sometimes when the truth walks out of the room, all you can do is keep asking. That was the moment the energy shifted completely. Everyone in that chamber, even those who had come to oppose her, could feel it. The balance of power had flipped. Jasmine Crockett had turned an insult into an awakening, a clash into a statement. Pam Bondi might have walked out of that room, but Jasmine had walked straight into history, not with anger, not with spectacle, but with the quiet, unshakable force of truth that refused to be ignored. When the door closed behind Pam Bondi, the echo lingered longer than it should have. It wasn't just the sound of footsteps leaving. It was the sound of power shifting hands. The room felt different now. The tension that had filled every corner moments ago was gone, replaced by something calmer, heavier, almost reverent. Everyone knew they had witnessed something that didn't happen often in politics, a moment when truth stood taller than ego. Jasmine Crockett sat quietly for a few seconds. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. Her expression stayed composed, as if she was carrying the weight of what had just unfolded. The cameras were still rolling, but she wasn't performing. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried the same calm strength that had defined every word she'd said since the confrontation began. "You see," she began softly, "this isn't about one argument or one person. It's about what happens when truth becomes inconvenient, and how far some people will go to avoid facing it." The words hung in the air. No one interrupted this time. Even the members who had been ready to defend Bondi earlier kept their heads down. The silence wasn't out of fear, it was out of respect. Jasmine continued, her tone still measured. "We can sit in these halls, argue over policies, trade fancy words about accountability, but if we can't tell the truth when it matters, then what are we really doing here?" She paused for a moment, her eyes sweeping across the room. "People outside this building don't get to walk away from their problems," she said. "They don't get to gather their papers and leave when life gets uncomfortable. They face it. Every single day. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be." Her words cut through the air like quiet thunder. Jasmine leaned slightly toward the microphone. "For too long, power has protected itself. People like Pam Bondi have promised answers they never delivered. They've played with the truth like it's a game, forgetting that real lives depend on honesty. That's why moments like this matter, because every unanswered question tells us something about the people who refuse to answer." She didn't have to mention the client list again. Everyone knew. The mere mention of it earlier had cracked open something that couldn't be closed so easily. Now, even as Bondi was gone, her silence echoed louder than her words ever could. Jasmine took a breath and shifted her focus back to what truly mattered, the people she was fighting for. The seniors I talked about earlier, they don't have time for politics as performance. They're out there choosing between groceries and medicine, between heating their homes and paying for prescriptions. That's who I'm thinking about right now. Her voice softened, but it didn't lose strength. We can't pretend everything's fine while families are being crushed under the weight of inflation and broken promises. We can't call ourselves leaders if we're more worried about saving face than saving lives. Across the room, heads nodded, not in partisanship, in understanding. For the first time that day, it felt like everyone was on the same page, even if just for a moment. Jasmine continued, "Accountability isn't just about exposing others. It's about holding ourselves to the same standard. Every single one of us sitting here was elected to represent people who trusted us. They believed we'd be their voice. That means we owe them truth, even when it's hard, even when it hurts." Her words hit home. They weren't polished lines written by a speechwriter. They felt lived, real, and maybe, she said, her tone softening again, that's the hardest part of leadership, knowing that sometimes doing the right thing will make powerful people uncomfortable. There was a pause. The room stayed silent, but it wasn't empty silence this time. It was filled with thought, reflection, something deeper than politics. Jasmine had taken an ugly confrontation and turned it into a mirror, forcing everyone in that room and everyone watching beyond it to look at what integrity really meant. Then she added, almost as a whisper, "Pam may have left, but the question she ran from hasn't. It's still here. It's still waiting for an answer. And until it's answered, the truth remains unfinished business." That line hit differently. It wasn't just directed at Pam Bondi anymore. It was for every leader, every official who had ever hidden behind half-truths in silence. Jasmine took a breath, sat back, and for the first time that afternoon, allowed herself a small, quiet smile. Not of victory, but of resolve. "Let's move forward," she said, "but let's do it honestly, because the people deserve that much, and that was it. No grandstanding, no celebration, just a quiet truth echoing in a room that had finally gone still." As the hearing resumed, the air remained charged, but not with conflict, with clarity. Jasmine Crockett had done something rare. She had turned a public attack into a powerful statement about courage, truth, and accountability. Long after Pam Bondi's footsteps faded down the hallway, her absence lingered, not because of who she was, but because of what she refused to face. Jasmine, on the other hand, had done the opposite. She had faced everything, the insult, the pressure, the spotlight, and transformed it into something bigger than herself. For everyone watching, it wasn't just a political moment. It was a human one. A reminder that strength isn't about shouting the loudest, it's about standing your ground when it matters most. And as the hearing drew to a close, one truth was unmistakable. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just won an argument. She had earned respect, the kind that can't be taken away, the kind that comes only when courage meets conviction. The question she asked still hung in the air, unanswered, but unforgettable. Where is it now? And somewhere, beyond those marble walls, the silence that followed said everything.